Welcome to the Managing Conflict lecture. Basically, this lecture is about how to make sure the scene in this image isn't you reaching across the table to strangle someone because you're so upset. As a leader, negotiating conflict is absolutely necessary because there's nothing inherently wrong with conflict. Conflict is a neutral, normal experience. It's how individuals involved handle conflict or not handle conflict that can produce the undesirable outcomes. Conflict occurs when people are vying for limited resources, power, position, or status. When interests collide, where perceived scarce resources need to be divided, or when goals are seen as incompatible, the arising conflict is going to test the relationship that a leader shares with others. So, what are different types of conflict management styles? Well, here's a reproduction of the grid from your textbook. Let's start at the bottom. 1-1. When neutrality is maintained at all costs and people have a tendency to withdraw and not want to address the conflict, then we're dealing with avoidance. In 1-9, where we have a high concern for people but a low concern for the production of results, then we have more of an accommodation strategy, where disagreements are smoothed over or ignored so that the surface harmony can be maintained. Now, if we go back down to the bottom with a high concern for production of results and a low concern for people, that brings us to 9-1. And 9-1 is a competitor or competition conflict style, where someone is wielding authority, where the win-lose paradigm wins out. And then at the top, for 9-9, we have a high concern for people and a high concern for production of results. So we have a problem-solving collaborator in 9-9, someone who is embracing other points of view, evaluating them objectively against the facts, emotions, reservations, and doubts are examined and worked through. And smack dab in the middle with 5-5, we have a compromiser, someone who's bargaining and their middle ground positions are accepted so that no one really wins, but then also no one really loses. Now, I know when we look at the conflict styles, especially when we look at them in a table like this, we're thinking, okay, well, avoidance is definitely bad, and accommodation when you give in to other people is bad, and competition is bad because it doesn't deal with making sure that everyone gets something that they want, and reactivity is bad because that's when you just flip out. I call that the reality television style of conflict management. That's the image in the first slide of this lecture where people are just flipping out and physically attacking each other. That's not good, but compromise and collaboration where we try to find a middle ground and work together, those are the best strategies. That's not necessarily true, right? There's a place for every type of conflict management style, right? It just depends on the circumstances. And as a leader, it's up to you to know which one is best. Yes, you want to collaborate as much as possible, but let's say you have one member of your organization who is actually doing harm or harassing another member of your organization. As the leader, you might need to embrace a competitive conflict negotiation style to make sure that you protect the person who is being harmed. Let's say that you have a follower that's a bully and the follower is just trying to push your buttons. Maybe as a leader, avoidance is going to be the best conflict management strategy in that situation, right? Maybe you decide to compromise for a short period of time so that when you have more time and energy, you can collaborate later. So please don't be married to your stereotypes about which conflict management style is best. Instead, they are very much situational, and I encourage you to take the conflict management profile that will be in the course site so that you can find out which of these styles leans most heavily to being your style, and then you can decide whether that's a style that you pretty much want to carry out or whether you need to build up some skills in the other types of conflict management styles. Let's talk now about mangling conflict versus managing conflict. And these come from the Gottman's 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. So maybe you've talked about this in a family communication class or an interpersonal communication class. Well, it works in organizations too. John Gottman really hit the nail on the head with these 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So the first one is criticism. You could mangle conflict by criticizing someone and verbally attacking them, or you could use I language and express your needs and how you feel about the situation instead of using you language and attacking someone else. You could mangle conflict through contempt by attacking someone's sense of self or insulting them with the intention to abuse them. Or you could build a culture of appreciation and remind your followers and co-leaders of their positive qualities and find gratitude for their positive actions. You can mangle conflict by being defensive, victimizing yourself to ward off a perceived attack or reversing the blame. Or you could just take responsibility, accept other individuals' perspectives, and offer an apology if you've done something wrong. If you're defensive, that limits your opportunity for resolution. And people defend when they feel unsupported. So if you have followers that are becoming defensive, be empathetic and practice your listening skills. You can mangle conflict by stonewalling, withdrawing to avoid the conflict, creating distance, using the silent treatment, disapproval. Or instead of stonewalling, you could take a break. Spend some time alone, go for a walk, have a lunch by yourself, do some meditation, do something soothing or distracting so that you can be fully present when it comes to engaging the conflict. If you're refusing to acknowledge an issue or acknowledge someone's presence, period, that creates a wall that's very difficult to surmount. And people create these walls when they sense hostility. So if you're sensing the hostility, just pause. Again, like take a break. Look at the situation objectively and come back to it when you can be fully present. If one of your followers is stonewalling you, then again, pause, shift the conversation, and maybe ask them what it is that they're thinking. And maybe they'll tell you why they're starting to put their walls up, and then you can help bring them down. Bring the walls down, not the person. Bring the walls down so you can negotiate the conflict and manage it in an appropriate way. It's okay to be argumentative. It's okay to have spirited disagreements, but it's not okay to be aggressive, and it's not okay to be hostile. It's also not okay to have groupthink in your organization. Groupthink is a harmonious atmosphere where everybody agrees all of the time. Concurrence seeking limits discussion because the goal is to avoid arguments, but you don't want to avoid arguments. How are you going to get to the best solutions unless you disagree? And your organization has a culture of where it's important to disagree. There's more information about this in the collaboration lecture where we talk more about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So here's what happens when there's groupthink, right? You have a group of people together who think that they're invulnerable. They rationalize everything. They're going to live forever. They rely on stereotypes, peer pressure, self-censorship, mind guarding, and the illusion that everyone is on the same page to get things done. Everything in this left column is never 100% true. Some of these things are never ever true. I mean, we're never going to live forever. We're never all going to be on the same page about the same thing all of the time, and we're never invulnerable. So instead, when we want to get to solutions, we need to encourage disagreement. Again, we want people to disagree so that we can talk through all of the possible ideas and figure out what's going to be best for our organization. You want to ask different people to function as evaluators. So when you're leading a group, you might ask someone, hey, you play the devil's advocate today. Hey, you try to punch a hole in every idea that someone suggests, right? Not for every meeting, but sometimes you might want to assign the role. So one person doesn't feel like they always have to be the person that's bringing up the negative stuff, but each meeting you assign someone else to be the person to play devil's advocate so that the role gets to shift among people and everybody understands that person is playing and it's about the ideas and not attacking the individual. As a leader, sometimes you just have to remove yourself from the meetings. You really need your followers to say things that they wouldn't say if you were in the room. So remove yourself. Solicit advice from other leaders, solicit advice from other followers. Make it a habit of seeking out new information. And again, encourage people to play the devil's advocate. We went over that before. And silence does not connotate agreement. So if everyone in the room is nodding their heads, that doesn't mean that they agree. If you ask in the room, does anyone have anything else to say? And no one says anything, that doesn't mean that everyone agrees with you. So you might want to create, as a leader, anonymous surveys or a suggestion box or some other way for individuals to communicate what they're thinking. Because when you're in a group, this is what we're talking about, groupthink. People have a tendency to go along with the group or maybe just be silent, which doesn't show whether they're going along or not. But as a leader, it's your responsibility, even if you have to do it one-on-one, to figure out what your team members are thinking. And here is our final reflection question for this lecture. How can you raise your tolerance for conflict? And we have in this image someone who's meditating on an office table where everyone else is in conflict. It's important to remember, again, that conflict is necessary among leaders and followers. Leaders have to be challenged, but how you react to those challenges as a leader says more about you than it does anyone else. So how can you raise your tolerance for conflict? This concludes the Managing Conflict lecture.